Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started on our installation. I'm just gonna go through one of the pieces from each of the sections, and then we're gonna kind of just run through the rest of it quickly via time lapse, but we're gonna give you some tips and tricks on some of the harder pieces to get in. So we're gonna start down low here, and since we're in the back of the van, we're gonna be the highest numbers. So our lower panels here are labeled TX driver side low bay 12. So 12 is gonna be our very last section here. You're gonna have two pieces for every section except for the ceiling. So this lower one, A, is going to go in first. So we're going to actually slip that behind this piece of metal here, and that's why it's a little longer than your B piece. Okay, make sure that all your plug wiring is going to be still showing when you have everything installed. Once we have that in there, we can go ahead and do the next one. So B is going to go right on top. So we're going to slip it in the bottom corner here and just right up under this bracer. Okay. So you see on this bottom bay, we didn't need any tape or anything to hold it in. There's enough support from both the A-frame and the van itself to kind of keep everything tight in there. But now we're going to move up to this mid bay, and we are going to need some adhesive to hold that in place. So in your kit, you're going to get some 4-inch tape. This is double-sided tape, so you can roll it off and stick it on. I just usually do a couple strips per little section in the bay, if that makes sense. And you have 2 sections of insulation for this mid bay as well. But if you get your wall pockets, you're only going to put one up because the wall pocket kind of molds to this window bay. So but it still has room for one layer. But if you have the flat panel, you're going to do your A and then your B right on top of that. But you can put double-sided tape right on top of your A insulation piece and then stick your B piece right on top. Okay, so now that I've got the paper removed from all of our double-sided tape, we can go ahead and set this 3A piece, up in place. So the A section is just going to be a rectangle, so it's not really directional. So you just want to get it kind of right up to the corners here. And it's going to butt up to this next bracer, the TX 1.5. Just want to press it into that tape we set, and that's going to hold it in place. If you're doing a B piece, so a second piece of a flat panel, the edges of the insulation are going to be a little curved, so you'll be able to see kind of if it's directional. This one's not, but the forward one's going to be, so kind of pay attention to that before you stick it up there. So we're going to move up to our upper bays here. We have this channel going along right above the window bay. So this is the part that's going to be pretty tricky. We're going to show you the things that we found work pretty well to put this piece in, and then we're also going to show the forward section of this same channel. Basically, we already have our first piece in there. You're going to have 2 layers in this, just like we did in the lower bay. But this piece is going to be labeled TX driver top bays HORB for horizontal. So we found that putting a rope through, so we fed a rope through this channel all the way down to the Z line, so TX1 first, so that's already in there already. And then we're going to feed our actual insulation piece through a loop we've tied in this rope, and then just secure this with a piece of blue tape. This is going to allow us to pull this insulation all the way through this channel. If you can do it by hand, just kind of inching it along, but it's pretty tough and time consuming, so we found this works pretty well. And you're going to want to feed it from this end too. Don't just be pulling by the rope because you can pull the tape free. So another thing to keep in mind is you want this piece, once it's in the channel, to be flat against the wall like this. You don't want it to be bunched up or anything like that. It's not going to serve its purpose if it's not flat up against the wall like this, so it can kind of sit freely and have a little bit of space to breathe. And once we've pulled it out the other side, you can kind of tuck it back to this section here, and then Jackson will tuck it forward towards TX1. Okay, so now that we've fed that all the way through, we can see through all of these channels that our insulation's not bunched up or twisted. We have a good double layer. That's nice with this one. You can kind of see through and tuck your hands in there and make sure both layers of your insulation got in there nice and evenly. So now that we have this channel in, we're going to move up to our upper bay here. And again, you have diagrams of all these different sections, so your lowers, your mids, your uppers, and your tops, or your ceiling, sorry. So you'll be able to refer back to that for numbers and placement and all of that. But I've got my two for my very aft section, which is going to be 8A and B. So again, A is going to go first. So this top section, I'm not going to need any tape or anything since we've got all these channels. So I'm going to tuck A in first. And again, make sure everything's sitting flat and nice and loose in there so we get those insulating properties. And then I'm going to put B up right over top. Awesome. So now that we have our top section set, we can move on and explain a few different ways you can go about your ceiling. Okay, so we're going to move on to our ceiling. So in the extended, you're going to have this 7 piece. So your ceiling, the exact label is going to be TX Ceiling Base C7. So this is going to tuck right under or behind our TX C5 bracer here. For your ceiling panels, they basically span the whole width of your ceiling. So from your wire chase on your passenger side to your wire chase on your driver's side. And they're in sections between your ceiling ribs. So you're gonna have to, you have a few options. You can either cut out like the center section and then you'll have the side sections remaining and you can just tape them up, or if you want to snake them like under your ceiling bracers, you can keep the insulation in all one piece. Sometimes in the Transit, there's not really enough clearance to do that, but if yours does, go for it. You can also cut out like little 2-inch strips and stuff the ceiling struts themselves with insulation to add a little more protection that way too. Totally optional, so whatever works easiest for you and what you're most comfortable with, go for it. What we're gonna do is basically cut our panel, our insulation panels for our ceiling into 3 sections. So we're gonna have our outer ceilings and then our mid ceilings. So you can either do that by eye if you have a friend or something that you can hold it up and draw lines where you need to cut, or you can measure, whatever works best for you. So I've cut my C7 piece into 3 pieces. So I have my center piece here. I'm just gonna tuck it under this C5 bracer. And then I've placed a couple pieces of tape up there to hold it in place. That's okay if it kind of folds down here. You can also tuck it up over the bracer if you'd like as well. The wiring harness there is going to make that a little difficult, but that's okay. So once that's up there, we can put our 2 sides up. And then we're going to repeat the same process with C6. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cut my C6 piece in 3 pieces just like I did for my C7. And I've placed some tape along the ceiling, both in the middle here and on the outer edges. So then you can just stick your insulation right up into that bay. I usually butt it up against my C5. Got a little bit of space on either side here. And I'm just gonna tuck the excess right underneath the strap. And then we can do the same thing with the outer edges. And we're going to repeat that process for the rest of the ceiling. Okay, so the last section we wanted to give you some kind of pointers on is the bay right underneath this TX7 bracer. So basically this is your only opening in this section. So it's kind of tough to get the insulation all the way down here. It's going to run basically from here all the way to where our TX5 connects. So the easiest way we've found to do this is you're going to have 2 like long skinny pieces like this called top horizontal C and D. And we found getting a long rod like this, we have a 6-foot rod. I would get at least a 5-foot rod, maybe a 6-foot if you can find it. And we fold it in half and basically tuck the end of that fold right in on top of that rod, and then this will allow you to kind of just stuff it in there little by little. You want to make sure it's staying flat, so you can kind of guide it as you go here. Okay, so this we're going to want to get all the way to the end. Okay, so we've got our first one in there. We're going to do the same thing with our second one. So we've got our second piece here. Our first one's all the way at the end, and we're going to do a little bit of a different technique with this one. I'm just going to tuck the front edge in here and then just keep kind of feeding it through. You can still use the rod if you need to kind of help it along, but usually with this second one you can kind of just feed it along with your hands. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so now that that's in there, that should be the last real tricky piece we have, and the rest we're just going to go through and install based on the diagrams that come with the kit. So throughout your upper and lower sections, you're going to have a few pieces of insulation labeled 0.5. They're just going to be these like in-between pieces. So like say this was 3 and this was 4, this would be 3.5. It's usually easiest to do these first just because you can access them. Once you have all of this insulation in here and on either side, it's hard to get to these little like crevices, if that makes sense. So we're going to start with those on our uppers and our lowers just to get them out of the way, and you can see based on your diagrams that come in your kit where those are going to be. So we're going to do those first, then we're going to jump into the rest of the installation. So we've got all of our insulation in. Everything in the mid bays is taped up as well as with the ceilings, and then all the tops and lowers are kind of just tucked between the different bays of the van. So now that we have that all in place, we can move on to panels and track.